Emily loved her backyard pool, nestled behind her modest, ivy-covered fence in the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was her personal oasis, a shimmering slice of calm and luxury. Amid the strict rules and watchful eyes of the HOA, every evening, after a long day, she'd slip into the cool water, letting the world's worries drift away beneath the surface. The pool was her sanctuary, but lately, something was wrong. It started with small things. A wet towel left draped over the lounge chair when she was sure no one had been over, a faint splash heard late at night, even muddy footprints on the decks that hadn't been there before. Emily told herself it was just her imagination, the product of too much stress and maybe a few too many mystery novels. But the feeling didn't go away. One night, after tucking her children into bed, Emily stepped outside to fill a glass of water from the kitchen sink and glanced out toward the pool. The moon was bright, casting silver ribbons across the surface. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she caught movement, a fleeting shadow darting behind the tall hedge. Her heart skipped a beat. "Who's there?" she called softly, her voice trembling just a little. There was no answer. The night was still again, as if the shadow had been swallowed by the darkness itself. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. It was real. Someone had been there. She pulled out her phone and checked the security cameras she had installed weeks ago, mostly as a precaution after some petty vandalism in the neighborhood. The footage was grainy, but there, just beyond the fence, was a figure slipping away silently, a silhouette shaped unmistakably like Karen. Karen, the dreaded HOA Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, the self-appointed ruler of the streets, the woman who patrolled rules with an iron fist and a sharp tongue, but also a woman who seemed to believe that the neighborhood, especially the pool, was hers by right. Emily swallowed hard. Karen was the last person she wanted snooping around her private space. The rumors were true. Karen didn't just enforce HOA rules. She bent them to her will, using them as weapons to intimidate neighbors and settle personal scores. The thought of Karen sneaking into her pool after hours was maddening and terrifying over. The next few days, Emily watched with growing unease. She'd arrive home to find footprints where no one should have walked. Towels disappeared, then reappeared draped over chairs in ways that suggested deliberate provocation. And every time she glanced toward the pool, she half expected to see Karen lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The worst part, the HOA board, heavily influenced by Karen and her clique, seemed unwilling to act. Emily's polite complaints were met with vague promises, or ignored altogether. It was clear. Karen had the power, and Emily was on her own. One evening, as Emily sat on her porch, the sun dipping low behind the trees, she heard it again. The faintest splash from the pool. Her skin prickled with cold sweat. Someone was in there. Someone who didn't belong. She stood, heart pounding, and crept toward the pool gate. Her hands trembled as she reached for the latch. Just as she was about to swing it open, a rustle in the bushes made her freeze. Eyes wide, she peered into the darkness and saw Karen's unmistakable silhouette, retreating, clutching a beach. Towel like a trophy. Emily's mind raced. How long had this been going on? What else had Karen taken or done when no one was watching? Most importantly, how could she stop her? The stage was set. Emily knew she had to be smarter, faster. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question lingered in her mind, sharp as a knife. Who was really invading whose territory? The night stretched longer for Emily, each one heavier with unease. After the shadowy glimpse of Karen at the pool, the sense of violation settled deep inside her like a cold stone. It wasn't just the trespassing. It was the audacity. Karen wasn't just breaking rules. She was flouting them with a boldness that unsettled the entire neighborhood. Emily's mind replayed that night over and over. Karen's silhouette, slipping away like a phantom, clutching that stolen towel as if it were a prize. But why? Why risk everything to sneak into someone else's pool? Especially one clearly marked private. The answer, Emily suspected, was rooted in Karen's obsession with control. She was the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog, the iron fist behind the HOA's strictest rules. But Emily had started to see a darker side. Karen wasn't just enforcing order. She was expanding her territory, claiming power where none was hers to take. Despite her growing fear, Emily refused to be a silent victim. She began patrolling the perimeter, pacing her backyard like a sentry. Late one night, she stood hidden behind the hedge, waiting, her breath caught in her throat as the faint crunch of leaves reached her ears. There, under the pale glow of a street lamp, Karen appeared again. She moved with practiced stealth, eyes darting around like a cat on the hunt. Emily's heart hammered as Karen crouched by the gate, testing the lock. But it wasn't locked. Emily's blood ran cold. The gate, which Emily had carefully secured each night, had been left unlocked. Or worse, Karen had found a way to bypass it. The rules no longer protected her sanctuary. Karen's boldness had escalated from sneaky glances to full trespass. The pool became a battleground of silent assaults. Towels vanished from chairs. Pool toys were scattered in the grass, and subtle signs of Karen's presence emerged each morning, like a breadcrumb trail of defiance. She left no note, no apology, only a message that she was there, watching, claiming. Neighbors noticed too. Quiet conversations bubbled up at weekend barbecues and on front lawns. Some whispered sympathy for Emily. Others dreaded Karen's wrath, afraid to speak openly. The HOA board meetings became a minefield, with Karen wielding influence like a weapon, deflecting complaints and dismissing concerns with icy smiles. Emily's isolation deepened. She felt like a target in a game where the rules were constantly changing. Every glance over her shoulder, every creak of the fence, was a reminder that Karen was still out there, unseen but dangerously close. One evening, Emily sat by the pool, clutching a cup of cold tea, trying to steady her nerves. She watched the moonlight ripple across the water's surface, wondering how many nights Karen had enjoyed this sanctuary at her expense. Then a new thought struck her. Karen wasn't just sneaking in for a swim. This was about power, about control, about sending a message to Emily and everyone else who dared resist. Emily's resolve hardened. If Karen wanted a war of wills, she would fight back, but on her terms. No more fear, no more silence. She would turn Karen's own tactics against her. That night, she began sketching plans, not just to protect her pool, but to expose Karen. The question wasn't whether she could catch Karen in the act. It was how to make sure the whole neighborhood saw the truth. As Emily stared into the darkened pool, the reflection of the moon shimmered like a secret waiting to be revealed. The battle had only just begun. Rumors spread like wildfire through the tight-knit neighborhood. What started as quiet whispers behind closed doors soon grew into heated debates on manicured lawns and during hurried exchanges at the local grocery store. Emily's private struggle with Karen wasn't just a personal nuisance anymore. It had become a community dilemma, a simmering powder keg ready to ignite. Neighbors who had once exchanged polite nods now eyed one another with suspicion. The subtle fractures that had long lain beneath the surface were exposed by Karen's relentless invasions. It wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about power, pride, and unspoken resentments. Some sided quietly with Emily. They saw the evidence, the disturbed towels, the footprints, the unmistakable shadow glimpsed in the dead of night. But fear kept many from speaking out. Karen had a reputation, not just for her rule enforcement, but for her sharp tongue and unforgiving grudges. To cross her was to invite conflict, and in a neighborhood where peace was prized above all, few wanted to risk it. At the next HOA meeting, Emily arrived armed with a mix of nerves and determination. She had spent days gathering her thoughts, preparing to speak out, hoping for support or at least some acknowledgement from the board. But as soon as Karen entered the room, the atmosphere shifted. The tension was palpable. Karen took her seat at the head of the table with a smug smile, as if daring anyone to challenge her. When Emily raised the issue of the unauthorized pool visits, Karen dismissed it with a wave of her hand. People need to understand this community is about sharing and cooperation. Karen said smoothly, "The pool belongs to all of us, and those who exclude neighbors only create division." Emily felt her frustration boil. She knew the HOA rules inside and out. The pool was designated as private property for certain homes, including hers. Karen was twisting facts, turning rules to her advantage. But the board remained silent. Some members shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to confront Karen's domineering presence. Others glanced at Emily with pity or caution, signaling that challenging Karen could mean trouble. Walking out of the meeting, Emily felt the weight of isolation settle heavier than ever. Karen's influence was a wall too tall to climb alone. Back at home, Emily's neighbors approached in hushed groups. One by one, stories emerged. A borrowed tool never returned. Petty fines levied unfairly. Whispered threats disguised as friendly advice. Karen's reign was larger than Emily had imagined. Yet, amid the unease, small sparks of courage flickered. A few neighbors began to ask questions, quietly gathering information. Watching Karen's movements more closely, Emily realized she wasn't entirely alone. The tension thickened with every passing day. Emily's vigilance became almost obsessive. She checked her cameras obsessively, cataloged every detail, and started noticing subtle changes. Karen's new routes, the timing of her visits, even the way she watched from her own porch across the street, eyes narrowed like a hawk. One evening, as Emily reviewed the latest footage, she caught something unexpected. Karen wasn't just sneaking into the pool, she was meeting someone there, a shadowy figure who appeared briefly before vanishing into the night. The mystery deepened. Was Karen orchestrating something bigger? A private agenda, hidden beneath the guise of neighborhood care? Emily's mind raced, torn between fear and determination. The stakes were no longer just about a backyard pool. They had become a question of safety, trust, and community survival. Late at night, Emily lay awake, the moonlight casting strange shadows across her ceiling. The pool, once a symbol of peace, now seemed like a battlefield, where invisible wars raged. The neighborhood was on edge, and Emily was ready to fight, not just for her pool, but for the soul of her community. Emily knew she was fighting an uphill battle. Karen's dominance over the HOA and her knack for twisting facts meant that simple complaints would never stop the relentless trespassing. Fear and silence had given Karen unchecked power, and it was time to break that cycle. Sitting at her kitchen table, Emily spread out her notes, sketches, and photos from the security footage. Her mind raced through possibilities. What could catch Karen without risking confrontation or legal backlash? How could she prove once and for all that Karen was sneaking into her pool, No matter how much the HOA tried to cover for her, the answer came suddenly, sparked by a childhood memory of harmless pranks and clever tricks. Emily smiled, a plan forming. She wouldn't just catch Karen. She would freeze her in shame, quite literally. First, she researched non-harmful deterrents, motion, sensors, hidden cameras, and automated alerts. She ordered discrete infrared sensors and a high-definition camera with night vision to capture every second of Karen's movements. The devices were small, silent, and strategically placed so no one could spot them. Next, she devised the centerpiece of her plan, a clever ice-based trap designed to embarrass rather than injure. The idea was simple but brilliant. At the moment Karen crossed the pool gate after hours, a discreet sprayer would release a fine mist of cold water, just enough to soak and chill, creating the perfect frozen moment of surprise, paired with a hidden spotlight and a pre-recorded voice announcing the trespass. It would turn Karen's bold intrusion into a spectacle she couldn't deny. Emily chuckled quietly as she imagined Karen's shocked expression. Drenched and caught, red-handed in front of the entire neighborhood. But timing was crucial. The trap had to trigger perfectly without alerting Karen beforehand. It had to be subtle, almost invisible, an invisible net woven out of technology and human ingenuity. For days, Emily tested the equipment. She adjusted sensors, repositioned cameras, and programmed the voice recording to sound firm but polite. Unauthorized access detected. Please respect private property. At night, she stayed awake, watching screens, waiting for any sign of Karen. The tension mounted with every quiet hour. Her nerves a taut wire stretched to the breaking point. Meanwhile, Emily's mind flickered with doubts. What if Karen figured it out? What if the trap backfired? What if the community turned against her for setting a trap? Instead of resolving the issue peacefully. But beneath the worries burned a fierce determination. She refused to be a victim. This was her home, her sanctuary. Karen had pushed too far, and it was time for consequences. As the sun set on the 7th day, Emily made the final preparations. The motion sensors were armed, cameras rolling silently. The ice mist sprayer loaded and ready to fire. She hid in the shadows of her porch, clutching a warm blanket and a camera remote. Her heart pounded like a drumbeat in the still night air. Every sound seemed amplified. The chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of streetlights. Then, just as Emily's patience was about to snap, a familiar figure appeared, a silhouette moving cautiously toward the pool gate. Karen, Emily held her breath. The trap was set, the stage was ready, and the moment of truth was about to arrive. The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your skin and steals every breath. Emily's muscles coiled tight as she crouched behind the tall hedge near the pool gate. The warmth of the blanket forgotten in the adrenaline, surging through her veins. Her eyes were locked on the shadows beyond the fence. Every sense sharpened to catch the slightest movement. Minutes passed like hours. The air hung heavy with anticipation, every creak of the old wooden fence making her heart jump. She clenched the camera remote tightly in her hand, fingers trembling. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached the gate. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Karen. Karen moved with the confidence of someone who believed she owned the neighborhood, or at least the pool. She paused briefly, glancing over her shoulder as if sensing eyes watching her. But she saw nothing except the cold moonlight and the quiet street. The gate's latch was already unlocked. Whether by design or carelessness, Emily wasn't sure. and Karen pushed it open with an effortless shove. The sensors she'd installed detected her motion instantly. A soft beep echoed from the control panel. Lights flickered on, hidden floodlights bathing the pool area in bright, almost blinding white. Emily held her breath as the pre-recorded voice echoed crisply through concealed speakers. Unauthorized access detected. Please respect private property. Karen froze, eyes wide, a flush rising to her cheeks. Then, the sprayer hissed quietly. A fine mist of icy water blasted from hidden nozzles, catching Karen from head to toe in an unexpected chill. The cold was sudden and sharp, like a slap. From winter itself, she gasped, stumbling back, soaked and shivering, frozen not just by the cold, but by the shock of being caught. Emily's camera clicked furiously, capturing every moment of Karen's stunned expression. The surprise, the embarrassment, the slow dawning realization that her sneaky invulnerability had been shattered. Karen's lips parted, as if to protest, but the words never came. The spotlight held her like a spotlight on a stage, and the neighborhood's silent watchers began to stir, drawn by the commotion. From porches and windows, neighbors emerged, whispering and pointing, the long-hidden tension finally spilling out into the open. Karen's face burned with humiliation as Emily stepped forward from the shadows, voice steady but firm. This is my property, Karen. You don't have permission to sneak in here, and you certainly don't get to bend the rules when it suits you. Karen opened her mouth again, this time to argue, but the crowd's quiet murmurs told her she'd lost whatever power she once held. No one came to her defense. The mask of control cracked and fell away. Emily's heart pounded fiercely, a mix of triumph and relief flooding through her veins. But as Karen's retreating figure disappeared into the night, something unexpected flashed in Emily's mind, an uneasy question about what Karen's motives really were, and what secrets might still be hidden beneath her icy facade. The night had ended one battle, but the war was far from over. The morning light filtered weakly through Emily's bedroom window, but sleep had abandoned her long before dawn. Her mind buzzed with adrenaline and anticipation, replaying last night's scene like a vivid movie she couldn't turn off. Karen drenched and frozen, the neighborhood watching in stunned silence, and the slow, bitter fall of the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. But beneath Emily's triumph was a nagging unease, a sense that something deeper was stirring. By mid-morning, news of Karen's humiliation had spread like wildfire. Texts buzzed on phones, neighbors exchanged knowing glances, and the once impenetrable aura of Karen's control began to crack. For the first time, people dared to whisper about standing up to her, about reclaiming their neighborhood from fear and manipulation. Emily received messages of support from neighbors who had long been too afraid to speak. Mrs. Patterson, who lived 2 houses down, thanked Emily quietly during her morning walk. A few others stopped by, offering knowing smiles and cautious encouragement. Yet, even with the community rallying, Emily's victory felt incomplete. At the next HOA board meeting, the atmosphere was electric. A mix of shock, curiosity, and barely concealed anger. Karen appeared, pale and quiet, no longer the fierce enforcer, but a woman on the defensive. The board's usual hesitation gave way to awkward questions and thinly veiled accusations. Emily spoke calmly, presenting her evidence, photos, video footage, and her detailed log of Karen's trespassing. For the first time, the board couldn't ignore the truth. But then came the twist. Karen, with a voice cold and steady, revealed a startling secret. She wasn't just sneaking into your pool. Karen said, eyes locked on Emily. That pool holds something valuable, something you didn't realize was at stake. The room fell silent, the tension thickening. Emily's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Karen hesitated, then leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. There are old agreements, hidden clauses buried in the HOA documents. That pool is more than just water and tiles. It's tied to easements, property rights, and if things go wrong, it could change the entire neighborhood's landscape. The revelation hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She'd been so focused on Karen's personal vendetta that she hadn't considered the deeper implications. Questions swirled in her mind. Had Karen been trying to protect the neighborhood all along? Or was this another layer of manipulation? Determined to find answers, Emily dove into the dusty archives of HOA paperwork and legal documents. Hours blurred into days as she combed through contracts, deeds, and hidden clauses that spoke of land boundaries, water rights, and community easements. The documents hinted at a complex web of legal entanglements. Agreements signed decades ago, some forgotten, some deliberately obscured, that could grant the HOA broad powers over certain properties, including her pool area. Was Karen's obsession with the pool just personal, or was she trying to enforce rules that stretched beyond neighborly squabbles? Tied to real, binding legal claims, Emily's investigation drew her deeper into the neighborhood's history, revealing alliances and rivalries older than she'd imagined. The pool, once her private retreat, now felt like a chessboard, where powerful moves had been made long before she arrived. As questions piled up, Emily realized one thing clearly. Her fight with Karen was not just about boundaries or trespassing. It was about uncovering a truth buried beneath layers of pride, secrecy, and old power struggles. That night, Emily sat by the pool, staring into its depths. The water rippled gently, reflecting moonlight like a portal to the past and future. The battle lines were redrawn, and the stakes had risen far beyond what she ever expected. Emily's quiet sanctuary was now the center of a neighborhood's hidden war, and the next move could change everything. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's revelation was only the tip of a much larger iceberg. The neighborhood she'd thought she knew was suddenly a maze of secrets and silent battles, with her pool caught at the center. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily reached out to a local real estate attorney, someone with knowledge of HOA law and property rights. She met with him in his small office, a quiet room lined with bookshelves, packed with dusty legal tomes. Hidden easements and agreements are not uncommon, the attorney explained, tapping a thick folder on his desk. Many HOAs have clauses that give them control over communal resources, pools, parks, sometimes even driveways. But these agreements must be transparent and agreed upon by homeowners. Emily frowned. So why would these be hidden? That's the tricky part, he said gravely. Sometimes, boards with unchecked power bend rules or use ambiguous language to extend their influence. It's legal gray area, but it can lead to abuse. Emily felt a chill. Karen sneaking into her pool now looked like part of a deeper agenda, perhaps to enforce control that the HOA had quietly claimed but never publicly acknowledged. Back in the neighborhood, Emily's stakeout nights continued. The cameras caught Karen meeting again with the shadowy figure from before, a man Emily didn't recognize. Their hushed conversations hinted at plans far beyond petty pool disputes. Emily's heart pounded. Was Karen trying to rally support, or was she involved in something more dangerous? One evening, Emily decided to confront Karen directly. She found her on the porch of her house, the man waiting discreetly in a car nearby. Karen's smile was polite, but guarded as Emily approached. "Karen," Emily said, steady, despite the tension. "Why are you really so obsessed with the pool?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's not obsession. It's responsibility. This neighborhood needs order. People like you. People like me." Emily cut in sharply. Karen's gaze hardened. "You think this is just about privacy. It's bigger than that. That pool, that property, it's part of a legacy, a commitment to protect what's ours." Emily's pulse quickened. "Protect? Or control?" Karen's lips twisted into a half smile. Sometimes the two look the same. Suddenly, the man from the car stepped forward. "We don't want trouble," he said smoothly. "But this neighborhood has its rules, and those rules must be respected." Emily realized she was outnumbered, but not outwitted. She backed away slowly, mind racing. This wasn't just a feud, it was a warning. That night, Emily sat by the pool again. The water eerily still. The reflection showed a woman caught in the crossfire of power and secrets, but also someone refusing to back down. As moonlight danced on the surface, Emily whispered to herself, "I won't let this go." But deep inside, a new question burned. How far would Karen and her allies go to keep control? And what was Emily willing to risk to fight back? The battle for the neighborhood's soul was no longer just about a pool. It was about trust, power, and the very meaning of home. The final showdown came on a humid Saturday afternoon when the entire neighborhood gathered for the annual HOA picnic, an event Emily once dreaded, but now saw as her opportunity to confront the tangled web of secrets head on. Karen arrived early, radiating the same steely confidence that had once cowed the community into submission. Emily felt the eyes of neighbors on her, a mix of curiosity, sympathy, and quiet anticipation. Underneath the bright sun and laughter, tension coiled like a hidden serpent ready to strike. Emily had prepared carefully. She'd shared her discoveries with the board and several key neighbors, who now understood the stakes. Together, they were ready to challenge Karen's grip once and for all. As Karen took her place at the microphone, ready to lecture on community values, Emily stepped forward, holding a folder thick with evidence. "I think it's time we looked at the truth," Emily began, voice calm but unwavering. She laid out the HOA's original documents, highlighting the hidden clauses Karen had relied upon. But then came the real revelation. The documents also included a clause Karen had never mentioned. The pool was privately owned by Emily's property and explicitly excluded from any HOA easement. Gasp that rippled through the crowd. Karen's face blanched. Her confident mask cracked as Emily continued. Karen's trespassing wasn't just rude. It was illegal, Emily said. She wasn't protecting the community. She was abusing her authority to control and intimidate. Suddenly, from the back of the crowd, a voice rang out. "I can explain," said the shadowy man who'd appeared with Karen. The man stepped forward, revealed as a lawyer hired by Karen to find leverage over homeowners. But the truth came out. Karen had fabricated the hidden agreements by manipulating old documents, forging signatures, and twisting facts to create a false narrative of control. The evidence was undeniable, and Karen's allies melted away under the scrutiny. Karen stood frozen, the weight of her deception crushing her pride. But Emily wasn't done. She unveiled the final piece of her plan, a recorded confession captured by the hidden cameras during one of Karen's secret meetings, where Karen admitted her obsession was less about rules and more about power, control, and fear of losing her status in the neighborhood. The crowd fell silent, absorbing the truth. Karen's reign of fear shattered. The neighborhood exhaled collectively. A long-held breath finally released. Emily's clever trap had done more than freeze Karen in embarrassment. It had frozen the lies, the power plays, and the manipulation. With the truth out, the community began to heal. Emily worked with the HOA to rewrite fair, transparent rules that respected every homeowner's rights. Karen quietly moved away. The chapter closed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily stood by her pool, the water now calm and clear, reflecting a neighborhood reborn. She smiled, knowing her fight had protected more than just a pool. It had saved a community's trust and spirit. And sometimes, justice doesn't roar. Sometimes, it quietly freezes its enemies in shame.